Hey guys, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks. I've got a bit of a blast from the past for you here today. It's the T-28, the Tier 4 Soviet medium tank, which is either loved or hated in World of Tanks because it's the only way to get towards the real heavy Soviet vehicles that start with the KV-1. So why is it a blast from the past, you might be asking? Well, for the eagle-eyed of you, you might notice something different about this T-28, and that is that it is using the 85mm, the F-30, that used to be available on this tank way back in 2012 before patch 7.5 removed the gun for balancing reasons. Wargaming just introduced a premium version of this vehicle that has been rebalanced, some aspects of the tank improved, some aspects of the tank nerfed. I'm going to let you know in this video, is it worth it? And it looks like it's only going to be available for 24 hours on the European server at least. You might be wondering why it's available for one day only. Well, that's because it's part of the advent calendar that World of Tanks are putting out, where you can open it up. Oh, you feel so special. Let's take a look. Oh, look, there's a really cool animation. Oh, wow, that looks amazing. But don't believe the hype. Let's compare this vehicle to a regular T-28. So there is a choice of using two guns with the T-28 that are competitive, the 57mm and a 76mm, which is on the left and the right respectively. Let's see how our T-28E with the F-30 compares to them. So the 85mm gun has less DPM than the 57mm or the 76mm, but it has more penetration, a fantastic 120mm of penetration, which is very nice for a tier 4 tank. But it's the alpha damage on this 85mm that is fantastic, 160. You'll be doing nearly double every shot than the 57mm would, and an extra 50 damage compared to the 76mm. The caliber of the gun also means that high explosive shells work quite well with this 85mm gun, especially on the softly armored targets at lower tier. However, with big derpy guns usually comes terrible weapon handling, and there's no exception here. Your aim time is horrendous, with an aim time of 3.2 seconds, which pushes it well within the realms of heavy tanks. Now, the accuracy is significantly worse than the 57mm, but at least it's a lot better than the 76mm. And unfortunately for the tank, the dispersion values are very bad indeed. And the news gets a little worse with regards to the depression of the tank, which maxes out at 5 compared to the 6 degrees that you would get with choosing two other guns on the T-28. The mobility of the tank is also worse, 10 kilometers worse than the standard T-28, but thankfully the engine power of the tank is the same. But don't let that fool you, because the weight has gone up significantly. It has pretty much doubled, going from 16, nearly 17 tons to nearly 33 tons for the same engine power, which makes this vehicle a hell of a lot slower than the rather nimble T-28. And if you thought Wargaming were maybe going to go easy on you with regards to the ground resistances, well, that's not true, because the ground resistances are worse than on the T-28, which makes the difference in power to weight ratio even more brutal. Furthermore, the turret traverse of the tank has been decreased, and the track traverse has gone down by 4 degrees a second. So where has all this extra weight come from? Well, it's armor on the vehicle. The frontal armor has increased by 20mm, the side armor by 20mm, and the rear armor by 30mm. This means that the T-28 can now actually take a hit, whereas previously even high explosive shells would easily enter your vehicle. Also, with the extra weight comes a little bit of health, 30 more hit points to be exact, which is always a nice bonus, and the vehicle actually gets 10 more meters view range. And so all in all, you're pretty much trading any kind of mobility and gun handling that the tank gets for some seriously meaty alpha damage, decent penetration, and pretty much doubled effective armor, which I think is a great change, considering that the T-28 is meant to lead on to the KV-1, right? There is one very strange aspect about this tank that I should mention, however, and that is that it has 6 crew members, which is more than any other Soviet vehicle in my garage. And also, one of the most bizarre things about this is that 2 of them are radio operators. And so I had to scrounge around to find radio operators from my A-44 and T-34 Soviet medium tanks to be able to have a full crew in this vehicle. But this might be quite awkward for some of you who want to buy this tank to get some crew training and won't have Soviet radio operators that you either have to purchase for gold or train up fresh. But anyway, I think that's quite enough theory crafting. Let's get stuck into some gameplay. And so here we go. I am assaulting on Karelia in a rather nice matchup. There are only 3 tier 5 tanks on the enemy team that we have to watch out for. And I also forgot to mention the garage. This vehicle does not have preferential matchmaking. It can meet tier 6 tanks, so watch out for that. But then again, when you're using an 85mm that has 120mm of penetration with its standard ammunition, or if you want to load premium, 161mm of penetration, that's really no problem for taking on... I can't think of a tier 6 tank that I couldn't take on with that ammunition, which is always nice. If I was up at tier 5 having that gun, however, yeah, 161mm of penetration would start to struggle with some of the tier 7 heavy tanks. So this KV-1 seems to be caught right in his base. Not sure what he's doing. Is it a bot? Have no idea. Aiming his gun around. Maybe he's just having a little look. Anyway, let's take advantage of that. This will be a good opportunity to show you guys the capability of the gun. Check out this rate of fire. We've already done 331 damage to him. I adjust a little bit to try and hit the side of his turret, as well as also getting that mid plate. Another 164 damage. Are we going to be able to finish him off? No, one more bounce. The accuracy, not fantastic at this range of 344 meters. But that's still a very healthy amount of damage to have done to a tier 5 tank. Try and sneak in a shot into the tier 5 German lightly armored tank destroyer. Unable to find one, but we hit him in the side as he's trying to make a rundown to get our cruiser 4. Momentarily, I load a high explosive shell because I thought I was going to have to fire that at the PZSFL. But we didn't actually have to, so now we're firing our standard ammunition again. Actually, the high explosive shell that hit the side of that DW2, which has got some pretty solid armor, still did 86 damage. And check out how much ammunition you can take on this tank. You could literally kill the entirety of the enemy team pretty much 2 to 3 times over, I think, if you penetrate all your shells in this vehicle. Probably even if you get into a tier 6 matchup, which is one of the nice things about the tank, that I can afford to take a huge amount of high explosive shells and still have a plethora of AP and APCR rounds at my disposal. But I barely find that I ever need to fire the APCR rounds in this tank. Only if I really need to take on a higher tier vehicle do I need them. So that DW2 has been locked down by the British medium tank next to me, who kept him tracked, and we put another good hit into him, securing our second kill of the game. 1,111 damage done so far. Now we see a Chi-Ha. Or is that a Chi-Ho? No, it is a Chi-Ha on the enemy team. Boom. That's how long... Is he a tier 4? No, tier 3, sorry. That's how long those tier 3 Japanese light tanks will last against you. And we move on. Oh god, that tank's a bit more serious though. That's a Matilda. Probably one of the most powerful tanks in the game. We angle our armor straight, but we can't bounce any of his shells still. Going through us like butter. We decide to put another one into his tank, and we actually out-trade him there. Even though I took 5 hits from him, 5 hits from his gun is barely going to do over 250 damage. But 2 hits from my gun is going to do well over 300. Luckily for us, we narrowly avoid a shot from a T-28E F-30 on the enemy team as well. That probably, well, definitely would have taken us out if it had connected with our tank. But we put another one into him, and now we decide to sit put. We've already done 1,736 damage this game and picked up 3 kills. But we're in a bit of a tricky situation here, as there is a Hetzer on the other side of this rock. That means that I am permanently camped down, and the Matilda that was hull down in this location here will now have an easy vantage point over our position if we try and sneak out, so we're not going to be doing that. What I'm trying to do is to sneak a shot into the Coventor that is down below us. Bit of a tricky situation for this tank here. With only 5 degrees of gun depression, it'll be hard to go around that corner. We can't go back round that way, or the T-28E F-30 will get us as well. So what I try and do is drop down the slope a little bit and try to come around the corner where I can still make use of my 5 degrees of gun depression. Matilda spots us, however. He's been camping us. We don't manage to kill him. We go forward to try and avoid his shot, and he shuts us down. So, while this tank still has some pretty decent armor, as we saw towards the start of this game, as soon as that Matilda started firing at us, the 50mm of frontal armor that this vehicle gets, it can't stand up to that 120mm of penetration that the Matilda gets. Still the daddy of tier 4. And finally, my team manage to take out the Hetzer. So all in all, a very standard game for the T-28E F-30. We managed to pick up 1,700 damage, which is very nice for a tier 4 round. Let's just take a very quick look at the post-game stats, where you might be surprised about the earning potential of this tier 4 Soviet premium medium tank. So we managed to pick up nearly 53,000 credits here and over 2,350 experience. And because low tier tanks are so darn cheap, that's nearly a 50k profit in a 5-minute game in a tier 4 tank. Our armor held up pretty well this game. We received 13 hits, of which 7 penetrated the tank, mostly from that Matilda with the 121mm of penetration that vehicle gets, and 6 of them didn't penetrated, giving us a potential damage received of 605 with 220 blocked. One of the awesome features of this tank is that it gets a huge bonus to experience for being a premium vehicle. And while my base experience was only 1,048, if we take into account that premium for being a bonus vehicle, we get a very healthy amount of crew training that my Object 140 crew will thoroughly enjoy. So let's get stuck into our final bit of gameplay. So, with binoculars on this tank, our view range is rather nice, and we outtrade that Sherman 3 very well. He wants to pull back around the corner. It's not often that tier 5 medium tanks don't want to shoot at tier 4 medium tanks, but when you've got an 85mm like you do on this vehicle, they certainly do pull back in a hurry after you give them a taste of 161 alpha damage. You don't actually need to hit many tanks in this vehicle to be able to have quite a healthy game. Our armor bounced a couple of shots from those tanks as well. Now we're going to sneak back out, try and set our binoculars up, see if we can get a few more cheeky shots down this alleyway. Just like that, 155 damage. Lovely. Looks like that PZ-1C will have spotted us as he crosses. And it looks like the DW2 might come out again to have another little peek at us. Oh, unfortunately our accuracy didn't do very well there. Would have loved to have put another shot into that tier 4 German heavy tank. We ricochet another couple of shells, and we indeed put in our second shot. 139 damage there, and we take him out in 3. Man, you really don't last long in these low tier engagements. Feels like the rate of fire of this gun is very high indeed. And when you think that this vehicle gets fairly comparable DPM to a lot of very high tier heavy tanks in the game, or at least some of the higher tier medium tanks, it's no surprise that tanks don't last a long time at low tiers. So we're firing APCR rounds here. Kind of unnecessarily. I'd probably be able to get this guy with my standard AP rounds. And justice as we managed to hit his tracks there, probably, for being a scumbag. And I decide to fire AP for the last shell for no reason. We pull back to avoid the KV-1. Now we load a high explosive shell that I wanted to fire at him to finish him off. However, we don't manage to. Alright, so what next? Well, this KV-1S is trying to advance down the banana line, as I like to call it, and lots of other people like to call it. But the Sherman 3 makes his way here. Is that the same Sherman that we hit earlier? He's come back for vengeance. A high explosive shell does 51 damage and takes his tracks off. He puts in a good hit into us, however, and does 111. However, we hit him even harder, doing 150, and try to reload to be able to finish him off. But unfortunately, a T-28 F-30, who was also in a position right next to the Sherman, manages to sneak a shot over that must have entered our hull armor, probably from here, without us actually managing to spot him. Luckily, from here, my team managed to pull off a win after they hunt down the T-28E F-30 with a T-34 medium tank. So, quite a mediocre looking game, right? Hey guys, well, you might be quite surprised by the post-game stats. And that's because this 3-minute round gifted us 2,133 experience, and that's not with a double or a triple, that's just for this one game. An ace tanker and 46,000 credits. Now I did fire a few APCR rounds, but we still make 33,000 credits profit. And that's some serious crew training in an otherwise lackluster and mediocre game. And that's really because when you have this much alpha damage and penetration, you don't need to put many shots in to have a very decent round. And considering your rate of fire is nearly 10 rounds a minute, all you need is for them to line up in front of you. And so now on to the important question, right? Is it worth it? This tank costs just over £7 or €10 for the vehicle, a garage slot, and 1,000 gold. Well, personally for me as a tank collector, it's a bit of a no-brainer. I think this one will be quite rare, considering it should be only available for 24 hours. And funnily enough, I think this vehicle plays more like a regular T-28 should, when you consider that the next vehicle that a tanker would be playing would be a KV-1, which plays nothing like a standard T-28. And really, I would personally like to have seen this not be a premium vehicle, but just replace the standard T-28 in the game, and probably ease players in to one of the most popular tanks in the game, the KV-1. I think this tank will be a nice little pickup for those who prefer to play lower tier battles, want to have a bit of armor, and a very meaty gun, without having too much flashy mobility that they probably hardly use. And as I've shown in the post-game stats, you don't have to have a very good game to make a lot of crew training. So if you're a keen Soviet medium tanker, maybe you want to pick one up as well to accelerate your progress. And so hopefully this video was useful to those of you who are wondering whether this tank is worth it or not. If it was, do please consider giving it a like down below. It really helps the channel out. And let me know in the comments down below what you think about the T-28E F-30. A lot of you were telling me that you thought that the M4 Improved that was recently released in a similar package like this was much worse than the regular M4. Do you think that's the same situation for this tank? Or do you think the fact that this vehicle gets a more powerful gun tier for tier totally changes things? And as always guys, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.